Hello beautiful people, good morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are. So this dress by the designer Tubo has been trending for a while now, and I totally love the dress, and I thought to and a client asked me to make it for her, and I also thought to make the tutorial for you beautiful people on here on this channel. And so in this video we are going to be learning the pattern drafting, and we are also going to be learning the sewing tutorial in another video. I don't want this video to be too long. If this is what you would like to learn, keep on watching, like my videos, share with your family and friends, subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the videos I'm going to be posting in the future. My name is Winifred and you're welcome to the channel of beautiful people. So without too much talking, let's get to the honey of this video. I love you. Hey beauty, welcome to my channel. So now we are going to be starting this pattern drafting from scratch, and the first thing I'm doing is that I'm determining my block. And to determine your block, you divide your, because it's a blouse, you use your hip measurement divided by 4 plus 4 inches allowance, just to create more room for the pattern. And then you are going to draw that into a straight line. Once that is done, you are going to start taking your horizontal measurements, your vertical measurements, sorry, your bust point, your waistline, your hip, your underbust, and the likes. So now once I did that, then it was time for me to cut the pattern fully. So the first thing I did was that I took my bust point plus half inch, and bust point plus half inch, and then I'm going to draw a straight line to that. I'm trying to create the points, and then I'm going to draw a straight line. That will be my bust point. Now the next thing to do is to measure out your under bust plus half inch. I always like to put all my allowances on paper so that by the time I'm sewing, I'm just sewing it. There's not, or cutting my fabric too, there's no need to be adding any allowance. I've already added everything on paper. So after marking my under bust area, my waist area, the normal waist for this client is 16 inches, but because I wanted the stomach to be well snatched and to create a kind of silhouette around the waist, so I went down by 1 inch extra. So instead of 16 inches, I took a waistline of 17 inches, and then the down part is my hip line. So the length of my blouse is going to be 25 inches, although it's not up to 25 on paper. So by the time I'm cutting the fabric, I'm going to cut 25 inches. So I just changed to a marker pen so that you can see what I'm doing clearly. So now after that, I took my shoulder measurement divided by 2 plus half inch, and then I took my neck width of 3 inches. From my shoulder point, I went down by 1 inch, and then I connected that to the 3 inch mark to create the shoulder slope. Like I always say, our shoulder is not straight. We are not robots, all right? So then after that, I took down my armhole depth, which will also serve as my chest line, and then I drew my armhole curve. So once all of that is done, then we are going to start our pattern fully. I just measured a neck depth of 3 inches, and then I connected the line. So now the next step to do is to measure out your bust span measurement. That's your nipple to nipple divided by 2 plus half inch, and measure it from your bust point all the way down. That's my nipple to nipple, and then I connected it with a straight line. I wanted to say a very straight line. Yes, your line has to be straight. At the hip line, I went up by 1 inch. On the under bust, I took 1 inch on both sides, on the under bust and on the waist, and then I connected the line. And then at the bust point line, I am going to go down by half inch, and then I'm going to use a curve to connect the under bust point to the bust point area with a curve, like you can see me do. Then to create our shoulder dart, I'm going to measure what I have on my shoulder and divide it by 2, and then I'm going to connect from the bust point to that point, just like you can see me do. And then on that point, I'm going to mark 1 inch on both sides also, and then I'm going to draw a straight line to connect it to the bust point. So once that was done, I went ahead to connect the waistline to the hip line from the 1 inch I marked earlier. I'm so sorry for the background noise. Now the next thing we're going to do is that the 2 inches we took out from the shoulder, we have to replace it on the armhole. So I took 2 inches forward, and then I drew out my new armhole curve, just like that. So the new armhole curve is what we are going to be cutting out. The other one is not, is not needed. So the next thing we are going to do now is to take our horizontal measurements, that's our bust divided by 4. So what you are going to do is that I just extended my chest line so that I'll be able to draw it very well. You are going to mark out what you have from that point, from the edge of the paper to the starting of the dart, and then you are going to mark out what you have. Then you will jump and then continue marking your bust measurement divided by 4. After you've marked that, then you mark your 2 inches seam allowance. On the waist, you are going to do the same thing. You will divide your waist divided by 4. Once you know what you have, then you are going to measure from the edge of the paper to where the dart starts. Then you move it and then mark your waist divided by 4, and then you add your 2 inches seam allowance. So your hip is just straight because the dart does not really get to the hip line. So you're just going to mark your hip divided by 4, and then you're going to connect the line. So the reason why we left the dart and we jumped the dart and continued our measurements was because you have to replace whatever you have on the dart. If you don't replace it, you just go ahead and take your measurement like that. By the time you take in your dart, your fabric will be short and it will not size your client. So I went ahead to measure out my hip divided by 4 also, and then I connected the lines with my pattern master. So now the next thing I'm going to be doing now is to take, go upwards by 4.5 inches. I went upwards by 4.5 inches because I went up by 4 inches, and then I connected it with a curve to where my dart leg is starting from. That's to create the asymmetric part of the dress, because the side was asymmetric and it went really up. So once that was done, the next thing is to work on our neckline. But before I worked on the neckline, I said let's cut it out so that you can see what I'm doing clearly. I only cut out one piece of the front part because the front part does not really need any paparazzi as such, unlike the back. So we are almost done. So once this is done, now I'm opening a part of my dart so that I'll be able to measure out my neckline and take my gaping dart. So now what you are going to do now is that after I cut out a part of the dart, now I want to close my shoulder dart. I want to close my shoulder dart so that I'll be able to draw out my neckline. So I'm closing my shoulder dart now with my masking tape. So once that is done, remember that the neckline is a boat neckline. So from the 3-inch mark that we marked earlier, I went in by another 3 inches, and then the neckline did not really go down at the front. So I just maintained the 3-inch neck depth, and then I went outwards by 3 inches extra. So now what I'm trying to do now is to create the gaping dart. Anytime you have a boat neckline that is really wide, you need to create a gaping dart. So I just drew a straight line from one point of my neckline to the bust point, and then I took ½ inch off I just took ½ inch off, and that is that point that you are seeing, and then I'm just going to close it up. You have to close it up nicely. So that is the gaping that we have taken out. So your neckline, even though it's really wide, it will not be gaping. It's going to sit well on the person's body. Anytime you have a very wide neckline, you have to create a gaping dart, and that is the beauty of pattern drafting. You cannot create any gaping dart on your main fabric. If you were cutting directly on your main fabric, you cannot go wrong with pattern drafting. So once that was done, I opened up my shoulder dart after cutting my neckline, and then I just went ahead to cut the rest of the pattern. So I'm cutting off the rest of the dart, and then after that is done, our front pattern will be ready. Just watch the way I'm cutting, so that when you are about to cut yours, you would not make any mistake. So that's it, we are done cutting, and that is the side center front and the side front. So now after this is done, the next thing is to move to the back pattern. I'm just writing out the things that I need to note, so that when working on the back is going to be easier. So the back is not so different. You are just going to fold your pattern paper into two, because the back is really, there's a lot of work on the back, so you cannot just cut out one piece for the back. You have to cut out the full back panel, which is not a half bodice. You have to cut out a full bodice for the back, because we are going to be working on one side and then the other side is going to be different. So you just have to draft it the same. You have to draft the full pattern of the back. So now what I'm doing now is that I'm taking my bust point measurement. That's my bust point measurement, and I'm going to take my waistline measurement, which is 17 inches. Remember, the back does not have any other bust. The reason why we are even taking our bust point is because we want to determine our dart, where our dart is stopping and all that, and then the hip line. So everything I did to the front panel, the front pattern at the early stage of the pattern drafting, is what we are also going to do to the back pattern. So you are going to mark your neck width of 3 inches, your shoulder measurement divided by 2 plus half inch. You come down from your shoulder measurements by 1 inch, and then from the 3 inch neck width, you are going to connect your straight line, which serve as our shoulder slope. Then I marked out my armhole depth. So I marked out my armhole depth, and then I connected it with a straight line. I drew out a line to be perpendicular to it, and then I just created a curve which will serve as my armhole curve. So once that is done, the next thing is to divide. Well, I'm taking my neck depth of 1 inch, and then I connected that. Then the next thing I did was to take my bust span measurement. I took my bust span measurement divided by 2 plus half inch, and I took it from my bust point all the way to the hip line. So the next thing you are going to be doing now is to take your dart. So on the waistline, I'm taking half inch on both sides, and then I'm going to connect it to the bust point. That is where our dart is going to stop. And then on the hip line, I'm taking half inch on both sides also, and then I'm going to connect it to the hip line. So that is how our dart is going to be for the back neckline. So now, to create our to shape our clothes, you're going to place your tape on the chest line, which is where our armhole stops. You mark your bust divided by 4 plus 2 inches for seam allowance. Then at the waistline, you are going to mark your waist divided by 4, and then you don't forget to skip the dart. You first measure it up to where the dart is starting from. You skip the dart, and then you mark out your waistline divided by 4. Then after that, you mark out your 2 inches allowance, and you do the same also for the hip line. You mark your hip divided by 4. you place it at the edge of the paper, skip the dart, and then continue your measurement. And then once that is done, I'm going to be connecting all the points with my pattern master, and then I'm just going to cut that out. But at the armhole, I'm not going to cut the armhole yet, because we are going to be doing a lot of things and we might need some allowances. So I'm just going to cut it straight like that. I'm not cutting the armhole yet, so that by the time I need the space, I will not be short of paper. All right, so now what I did to one side of the pattern, I'm going to do to the other side of the pattern to make my full back bodice. If you have a tracing wheel at this point, just fold your paper into two and trace all the points that you've created, and then you are going to just draw out the lines. But because I don't have a tracing wheel, I'm just going to quickly mark out my points again, and then I'm going to draw the straight line. I'm taking my measurements. I don't just want to draw the lines, because I want everything to be accurate. You have to be very careful when making this tutorial. So if you've gotten to this point in my video and you are new to this channel, thank you for staying tuned. My name is Winifred. You're welcome to the channel of beautiful people. If you are not yet subscribed, kindly click the subscribe button, like my videos, share my videos with your family, your friends, even your foes. Let everybody learn, okay? Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my tutorials in the future. And you know what, always put your questions in the comment section down below. I'll be more than happy to answer all your questions, and everything that you don't understand on this channel, I'll be more than happy to answer. Also, do well to like my videos. Thank you. So after duplicating the right side of my pattern paper to the left side, and I have a full bodice, the next thing I'm going to do now is to work on my neckline. The neckline is an asymmetric neckline, so I'm taking 3 inches on both sides from the points, from the neck point, and then on this side of the pattern, I just marked the half of my armhole. I drew a straight line, and then I connected a line to join the new neckline that I'm creating. Then I went downwards a little by ½ inch. After going downwards by ½ inch, from that point I went outward by ½ inch again, and that will be the neckline. So I connected a line to that, and then on the other part of the neckline, I just connected the new point to the other neck width that I created, and that forms our asymmetric neckline. So now the box that I created earlier is not needed, so we are going to do away with that. So now on that asymmetric point, I just marked out ½ inch on both sides, and then I connected that to my bust point just to continue our dart. All right, because we are going to be cutting it out and it's going to be different panels. So the box and our shoulder, everything that we do not need is what I'm shading out. All right, so once that was done, I am going to take we want to create where the loop is going to sit at that point. So what I'm going to do is that on the waistline, I'll take 1 inch on both sides, and then on the hip line, I'm also going to take 1 inch on both sides, and then I'll connect that to my neck point. All right, so that is where the loop is going to be sitting. So I've connected that line to my neck point like that, and then on the waistline also, I already took ½ inch on both sides on the waistline. I think that is fine. On the hip line, sorry. So I just connected the line to the hip line like that, and then that side is going to be where the loop is going to be sitting. So now once that was done, I just drew my line from the bust point to the shoulder, just for continuation. All right, and then don't forget, on the front panel we went up by 4.5 inches, and that is the same thing I'm going to be doing on the back panel. So I went up by 4.5 inches. So now let's create our gaping dart. So I just marked out a point from my bust point to the neckline, and then I came out by ½ inch and drew another line, so that will serve as our gaping dart, so our asymmetric neckline is not going to be gaping by the time we are done. So now the next thing I want to do is to cut it out. So I folded into two because I wanted to cut out the asymmetric part first, and after that was done, I opened it up. Okay, I cut out my shoulder and my neck, shoulder slope, which is my shoulder slope. Then I started cutting out all my patterns. So I first cut out the first pattern, and then I'm trying to slit a part of the pattern open so that I can just create my gaping dart. So I just cut out number 3. That will be the side back, which is number 3 of the side back. So after that was done, I folded in my gaping dart, and I'm going to close it with my masking tape. Then after that, I went ahead to cut out number 1. So this is number 1 for the back, and that side is where the loop is going to be. So I marked it out. Then I cut out my neckline, and then once that was done, I cut out the rest of the darts, both the side for the loop and the other dart. So now that is number 2, which is the center panel for the back. The other parts are the side panel, number 1, number 2, and number 3. So once you are done, label where the loop is going to sit, and once that is done, you are ready and your pattern is ready to be used. Thank you guys for watching. Till I see you in my next video. I love you and I care. Bye.